As CHIDIMMA and her companions ventured deeper into the unknown, the path grew more treacherous. The terrain became rugged, with jagged rocks and dense forests that seemed to close in around them. The once clear skies were now shrouded in ominous clouds, and the air was thick with the scent of rain. Nkem walked beside CHIDIMMA, his eyes scanning the surroundings for any sign of danger. "We are getting close," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the rustling leaves. "I can feel it in my bones." CHIDIMMA nodded, her senses on high alert. The visions that had once guided her now seemed distant, and she felt a growing unease. It was as if something, or someone, was watching them, waiting for the right moment to strike. The group reached a narrow pass, with towering cliffs on either side. As they walked through, the sound of footsteps echoed off the stone walls, making them all the more aware of how isolated they were. Suddenly, a gust of wind whipped through the pass, carrying with it a faint whisper, a voice speaking in a language they could not understand. CHIDIMMA stopped in her tracks, her heart racing. She strained to listen, trying to make sense of the words, but they remained elusive, slipping away like water through her fingers. "We need to keep moving," Nkem urged, his hand on the hilt of his sword. "This place feels wrong." Reluctantly, CHIDIMMA agreed, and they pressed on. But the further they walked, the stronger the whispers became. It was as if the very air was alive, murmuring secrets that only the dead could understand. They finally emerged from the pass, and before them lay a sight that took their breath away, a vast, crumbling city, hidden deep within the mountains. The buildings were ancient, their walls covered in moss and vines, but there was an unmistakable grandeur to them, a testament to a civilization long forgotten. "This must be it," CHIDIMMA whispered, her eyes wide with awe. "The Forgotten Kingdom." The others nodded, equally mesmerized by the sight. But their wonder was short-lived, for as they stepped into the city, the ground beneath them began to tremble. The whispers grew louder, swirling around them like a storm, and the air turned icy cold. "Something's not right," Nkem warned, drawing his sword. "Be ready." CHIDIMMA reached for the pendant around her neck, the one her mother had given her before she died. She closed her eyes, focusing on the warmth it brought her, and for a moment, the whisper subsided. But then, a new sound filled the air, the sound of footsteps, heavy and deliberate, approaching from the shadows. They turned to see a figure emerging from the darkness, a tall, imposing man with skin as dark as night and eyes that glowed like embers. He wore robes of deep red, embroidered with symbols that seemed to pulse with power. "Welcome," the man said, his voice deep and resonant. "I have been waiting for you." CHIDIMMA felt a chill run down her spine. "Who are you?" she demanded, trying to keep her voice steady. The man smiled, revealing teeth as sharp as knives. "I am the guardian of this kingdom," he replied. "The last of my kind. And you, CHIDIMMA, have been chosen to fulfill a destiny that has been written in the stars." CHIDIMMA exchanged a wary glance with Nkem. "What destiny?" she asked, her heart pounding in her chest. The guardian stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "You carry within you the blood of both worlds, the living and the dead. You are the key to unlocking the ancient power that lies dormant in this land. But to do so, you must prove yourself worthy." CHIDIMMA's mind raced. She had heard of such tests in the old stories, trials that could either grant unimaginable power or bring about certain death. But she had come too far to turn back now. She squared her shoulders, meeting the guardian's gaze with determination. "What do I need to do?" she asked, her voice strong. The guardian's smile widened. "You must enter the Chamber of Souls and face the trials within. Only then will you be able to claim the power that is rightfully yours." CHIDIMMA nodded, though a part of her was filled with dread. "And if I fail?" The guardian's eyes flickered with something dark and dangerous. "Then your soul will be trapped in this kingdom forever, and the darkness will consume the world you know." CHIDIMMA swallowed hard, but she did not falter. She had faced darkness before, and she had emerged victorious. She would do so again. I accept the challenge, she declared, her voice ringing out in the stillness. The guardian bowed his head in acknowledgement. Very well. Follow me. As the guardian led them deeper into the city, CHIDIMMA felt the weight of her decision pressing down on her. But she knew she could not turn back now. The fate of her people, and perhaps the entire world, depended on her success. They reached a massive stone structure at the heart of the city, a temple unlike any she had ever seen. The entrance was flanked by towering statues of warriors, their faces stern and unyielding. The doors were carved with intricate patterns, glowing faintly in the dim light. This is the Chamber of Souls, the guardian said, his voice solemn. Inside, you will face 3 trials. Each one will test a different aspect of your being, your mind, your heart, and your spirit. Only by overcoming all 3 can you unlock the power that lies within. CHIDIMMA took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. She had faced many challenges on her journey, but she knew that this would be the greatest of them all. With a nod to her companions, she stepped forward, ready to face the trials that awaited her. The doors of the temple creaked open, revealing a dark, cavernous interior. CHIDIMMA hesitated for only a moment before stepping inside, the weight of the guardian's words heavy on her shoulders. As the doors closed behind her, plunging her into darkness, she knew that her true test had only just begun. CHIDIMMA stepped into the darkness of the Chamber of Souls, her heart pounding in her chest. The air was thick with a cold, oppressive silence, and she could barely see a few steps ahead of her. She felt the weight of the ancient stone walls closing in, the whispers of forgotten souls echoing through the air. Suddenly, a dim light flickered to life, illuminating a narrow path before her. The light came from a series of torches, each one igniting in turn, leading deeper into the temple. With a deep breath, CHIDIMMA began to walk, her footsteps echoing in the vast emptiness. As she ventured further, the path began to twist and turn, leading her into a labyrinth of corridors. The walls were adorned with strange symbols that seemed to pulse with a faint, eerie glow. CHIDIMMA could feel the energy emanating from them, as if the very stones were alive with ancient magic. After what felt like hours of walking, CHIDIMMA reached a large, circular chamber at the heart of the labyrinth. In the center of the chamber stood a stone pedestal, upon which rested a small, ornate box. The box was covered in intricate carvings, and it seemed to hum with a low, resonant energy. CHIDIMMA approached the pedestal, her eyes fixed on the box. She knew instinctively that this was the first trial, the trial of the mind. She reached out to touch the box, but as soon as her fingers brushed against it, the chamber was plunged into darkness once more. A voice, cold and emotionless, echoed through the chamber. To unlock the power within, you must first unlock the secrets of your mind. Answer the riddle that lies before you, or be lost in the labyrinth forever. CHIDIMMA's heart raced as she tried to focus on the voice. She knew that this was the first test, and that she had to keep her wits about her if she was to succeed. The voice spoke again, this time in a whisper that seemed to come from all directions at once. I speak without a mouth and hear without ears. I have no body, but I come alive with wind. What am I? CHIDIMMA closed her eyes, her mind racing. She had heard riddles like this before, stories told by the elders around the fire. She focused on the words, trying to piece together the clues. A voice, she whispered, opening her eyes. The answer is a voice. As soon as the words left her lips, the chamber was flooded with light. The box on the pedestal began to glow, and with a soft click, it opened, revealing a small, gleaming key. CHIDIMMA let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She had passed the first trial. But as she reached for the key, the voice spoke again. One trial is complete, but 2 more remain. The next test will challenge your heart, your courage, and your resolve. CHIDIMMA took the key and placed it in her pocket. She knew that the journey was far from over. As the light began to fade, she steeled herself for what was to come. The walls of the chamber began to shift and move, revealing a new path that led deeper into the temple. With the key in hand, CHIDIMMA set off once more, determined to see the trials through to the end. The new path led CHIDIMMA into a vast, open chamber filled with towering pillars and cascading waterfalls. The air was warm and humid, and the sound of rushing water filled her ears. In the center of the chamber, a large stone bridge spanned a deep, seemingly bottomless chasm. On the other side of the bridge stood a grand door, engraved with the same symbols that had guided her through the labyrinth. CHIDIMMA knew that this bridge would lead her to the next trial. She stepped onto the stone, her footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. But as she reached the middle of the bridge, she felt a sudden chill, and the air around her grew thick with fog. From the mist, a figure emerged, a woman, tall and graceful, with eyes as sharp as daggers. Her face was strikingly familiar, though CHIDIMMA could not place where she had seen it before. "CHIDIMMA," the woman said, her voice soft but filled with a cold edge. "Do you know who I am?" CHIDIMMA shook her head, though a sense of recognition gnawed at the back of her mind. "I am your mother's sister," the woman continued, stepping closer. "I am the one who has been watching over you since the day you were born. But now, you must prove that you are worthy of the power you seek." CHIDIMMA's heart pounded. Her mother had never spoken of any sister. Could this woman be telling the truth? Or was she another test, a figment of the trial meant to deceive her? "What do you want from me?" CHIDIMMA asked, her voice trembling. The woman's eyes bore into hers. "I want you to choose," she said. "On one side of this chasm lies the power you seek. On the other, the safety of those you love. You cannot have both. Which will you choose?" CHIDIMMA's mind raced. She had come this far, endured so much, to unlock the power within the temple. But she also knew that her journey had never been just for herself. It had been for her family, for her people, for the kingdom that had been torn apart by darkness and lies. "I choose my people," CHIDIMMA said, her voice steady. "I choose to protect them, no matter the cost." The woman's expression softened, and she nodded approvingly. "Then you have passed the trial of the heart," she said, her form beginning to fade into the mist. "Remember, CHIDIMMA, true power comes not from what you possess, but from what you are willing to sacrifice." As the fog lifted, the door at the end of the bridge began to glow, and CHIDIMMA felt a warmth spread through her chest. She had passed the second trial. But she knew that the final test, the trial of the spirit, would be the hardest of all. CHIDIMMA crossed the bridge and pushed open the grand door. Inside was a small, dimly lit chamber, with a single torch flickering on the far wall. In the center of the room, a circle was etched into the stone floor, filled with strange, ancient symbols that seemed to shift and move as she approached. The moment CHIDIMMA stepped into the circle, the door behind her slammed shut, and the torch went out, plunging the room into total darkness. A deep, resonant voice filled the chamber, echoing off the walls. "To unlock the power of the spirit, you must face your deepest fears. Only by conquering them can you unlock the final seal." The darkness around CHIDIMMA began to swirl, forming shapes and figures that loomed over her like shadows. She could feel her heart racing, her breath quickening as the figures grew clearer, more defined. Before her stood a vision of her father, his face twisted in pain. "You could not save me," he said, his voice filled with sorrow. "You let me die." CHIDIMMA shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "No," she whispered, "I tried. I did everything I could." The figure of her father faded, replaced by that of her mother. "You are not my true daughter," her mother said, her voice cold and distant. "You are a child of darkness, born to bring ruin upon us all." CHIDIMMA fell to her knees, her heart breaking at the words. "No, I'm not. I'm not." The shadows closed in around her, each one a manifestation of her deepest fears, her worst regrets. But as they loomed over her, ready to consume her, Chidimma heard a voice, a soft, gentle voice that seemed to come from within her. Remember who you are, Chidimma. Remember the strength that lies within you. Chidimma took a deep breath, focusing on the warmth of the pendant around her neck. She closed her eyes, shutting out the darkness, the fear, the doubt. She knew that these visions were not real, that they were only reflections of her own insecurities. I am Chidimma, she said, her voice growing stronger. I am a child of both worlds, and I will not be defined by fear. As she spoke, the shadows began to retreat, the darkness lifting like a veil. The chamber filled with light, and the figures faded away, replaced by a feeling of peace and clarity. You have passed the final trial, the voice said, filled with warmth and approval. The power of the spirit is yours. Chidimma felt a surge of energy coursing through her, filling her with a sense of strength and purpose unlike anything she had ever known. She had faced her fears, conquered her doubts, and emerged victorious. The circle on the floor began to glow, and a door opened in the wall, revealing a staircase leading upwards. Chidimma knew that her journey was not yet over, but she also knew that she was ready for whatever lay ahead. With renewed determination, she climbed the stairs, her heart filled with hope. She had unlocked the power within the temple, and now she would use it to save her people and bring peace to her kingdom. As she reached the top of the stairs, Chidimma found herself standing in a grand hall bathed in a soft, golden light. The walls were adorned with intricate carvings, depicting scenes of ancient battles, wise leaders, and the spirits of the ancestors guiding their people. At the far end of the hall, a large throne sat atop a raised platform, its surface shimmering with a mystical energy. Chidimma approached the throne, her steps echoing in the vast chamber. As she drew closer, she could feel the power emanating from it, a force that resonated deep within her. She knew that this was the source of the temple's power, the final gift that would complete her journey. Standing before the throne, Chidimma took a deep breath and placed the 3 keys she had collected from the trials into the slots on the armrest. As she did, the throne began to hum with energy, and a bright light enveloped the entire hall. The carvings on the walls came to life, the figures moving and dancing in a celebration of the power Chidimma had unlocked. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the center of the hall, a tall and regal woman with eyes that sparkled like stars. Chidimma recognized her as the spirit of the temple, the guardian of the ancient power. Chidimma, the spirit said, her voice echoing like a melody, you have proven yourself worthy of the power of the ancients. You have faced the trials with courage, wisdom, and a pure heart. Now, the power is yours to wield. Chidimma bowed her head, feeling a deep sense of gratitude and responsibility. I accept this power, she said, her voice steady. I will use it to protect my people, to bring peace to the kingdom, and to honor the spirits of those who came before me. The spirit smiled, her form glowing with a radiant light. Remember, Chidimma, true power lies not in strength alone, but in compassion, understanding, and the willingness to sacrifice for the greater good. You are the chosen one, the bridge between worlds, and the hope of your people. With those words, the spirit faded into the light, leaving Chidimma standing alone before the throne. She could feel the power coursing through her, a force that connected her to the ancestors, the spirits of the land, and the very essence of the kingdom. As the light began to dim, Chidimma knew that it was time to return to her people. She turned and walked back down the stairs, each step filled with a sense of purpose and determination. She had faced her fears, unlocked the power of the temple, and now, she was ready to face whatever challenges awaited her in the world outside. When she emerged from the temple, the sun was rising, casting a warm, golden glow over the kingdom. Chidimma felt a surge of hope as she looked out over the land. She knew that the journey ahead would not be easy, but she was no longer the frightened girl who had entered the temple. She was now a leader, a protector, and a beacon of hope for her people. As she made her way back to the village, Chidimma knew that the true battle was about to begin. The forces of darkness that had plagued her kingdom were still out there, waiting for their chance to strike. But she was ready. She had the power of the ancients, the strength of her ancestors, and the love of her people to guide her. The final battle was on the horizon, and Chidimma would face it with all the courage and wisdom she had gained on her journey. The future of the kingdom rested in her hands, and she was determined to protect it, no matter the cost. Upon her return to the village, Chidimma found her people waiting for her. Their faces were filled with a mixture of awe and relief as they saw the transformation in her. She was no longer just the young woman they had known, she was now their leader, their protector, the one who would guide them through the trials ahead. Elder Namdi stepped forward, his eyes filled with pride. "Chidimma," he said, his voice trembling with emotion, "you have returned to us, and I can see that you have succeeded. The power of the ancients flows within you." Chidimma nodded, a sense of responsibility settling over her like a mantle. "Yes, Elder. I have unlocked the power of the temple, but our journey is far from over. The forces of darkness are still out there, waiting for their chance to strike. We must be prepared to face them." The villagers murmured in agreement, their faces solemn as they realized the gravity of the situation. They knew that the final battle was coming, and they would need all the strength and courage they could muster. "We will stand with you, Chidimma," Elder Namdi said, his voice firm. "You have our loyalty, our strength, and our trust. We will fight by your side, no matter the cost." Chidimma felt a swell of gratitude as she looked around at the faces of her people. They were her family, her friends, and she would do everything in her power to protect them. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "But we cannot do this alone. We must seek out allies, those who share our cause and are willing to stand with us against the darkness. The kingdom is vast, and there are others who would join our fight if we can find them." Elder Namdi nodded in agreement. "There are villages to the north, in the mountains, and to the east, near the great river. They have faced the same threats as we have, and they may be willing to join our cause." "Then we will go to them," Chidimma said, determination in her voice. "We will gather our allies, unite our people, and face the darkness together." With that, Chidimma and a group of trusted warriors set out to find the other villages. Their journey took them through dense forests, across roaring rivers, and over towering mountains. Along the way, they encountered other villages, each one bearing the scars of the same darkness that had plagued their own. In every village, Chidimma shared her story, telling of the trials she had faced and the power she had unlocked in the temple. She spoke of the coming battle and the need for unity, for strength in numbers. One by one, the villages pledged their support, their warriors joining Chidimma's growing army. They shared stories of their own struggles, of the losses they had suffered and the hope they still held on to. Together, they formed a powerful alliance, united in their determination to protect their homes and their families. As the days turned into weeks, Chidimma's army grew, and so did the bond between the different villages. They trained together, learned from each other, and became a formidable force. They knew that the final battle was drawing near, but they also knew that they were stronger together. Finally, after weeks of traveling and gathering allies, Chidimma and her army returned to their village. The once small, isolated community was now a bustling hub of activity, filled with warriors from across the kingdom. The air was thick with anticipation as they prepared for the battle that would decide their future. Chidimma stood before her people, her heart filled with pride and determination. She had come so far, faced so many challenges, and now, she was ready to lead her people into the final battle. "The time has come," she said, her voice ringing out over the assembled warriors. "We will face the darkness together, as one. We will protect our homes, our families, and our future. This is our fight, and we will not back down." The warriors raised their weapons, their voices rising in a powerful cheer. They were ready, and so was Chidimma. The final battle was about to begin, and she would lead her people to victory, no matter the cost. The day of the final battle dawned with an ominous stillness in the air. The skies were overcast, the sun hidden behind thick clouds that seemed to swirl with anticipation. CHIDIMMA stood at the edge of the village, looking out over the vast plains where the battle would take place. Her heart pounded in her chest, a mix of fear and determination. She knew that this would be the fight of her life, the moment when everything she had worked for would be put to the ultimate test. The warriors gathered around her, their faces set with grim determination. They had trained for this moment, prepared themselves for the worst, but the reality of the battle ahead weighed heavily on them all. Elder Namdi approached CHIDIMMA, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You have done well, CHIDIMMA. No matter what happens today, know that you have made us proud." CHIDIMMA nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Thank you, Elder. But we must win this battle. We must protect our people, no matter the cost." Elder Namdi gave her a solemn nod, then turned to address the assembled warriors. "Today, we fight not just for our village, but for the entire kingdom. The darkness that threatens us is powerful, but we are stronger. We fight with the strength of our ancestors, with the power of the ancients, and with the love of our families. We will prevail." A cheer rose from the warriors, their spirits lifting as they prepared to face the enemy. CHIDIMMA felt a surge of hope as she looked at the faces of those who stood with her. They were not just warriors, they were her people, her family, and she would do everything in her power to protect them. As the sun began to rise, the first signs of the enemy appeared on the horizon. A dark, swirling mass of shadowy figures moved toward the village, their forms shifting and changing as they advanced. The air grew colder, and the ground seemed to tremble beneath their feet. CHIDIMMA took a deep breath, gripping the hilt of her sword. She could feel the power of the temple coursing through her, a force that gave her strength and clarity. She knew that this was her moment, the time when she would prove herself as a leader and a protector. "Form ranks," she called out, her voice strong and commanding. The warriors moved into position, their shields raised and their weapons at the ready. The enemy forces drew closer, their forms becoming clearer as they approached. They were a terrifying sight, a horde of twisted, nightmarish creatures born of darkness and shadow. But CHIDIMMA did not falter. She knew that they had faced worse in the temple, and they had emerged victorious. As the enemy reached the edge of the village, CHIDIMMA raised her sword high, the blade glowing with a brilliant light. "For our people. For our kingdom. Attack." With a roar, the warriors charged forward, their weapons clashing with the darkness in a fierce and brutal battle. The air was filled with the sounds of steel against steel, the cries of the wounded, and the shouts of defiance as the villagers fought with everything they had. CHIDIMMA led the charge, her sword cutting through the enemy with precision and power. She could feel the strength of the ancients guiding her movements, the energy of the temple fueling her every strike. She was unstoppable, a force of nature on the battlefield. But the enemy was relentless, their numbers seemingly endless. For every creature they cut down, more seemed to rise from the shadows. The warriors fought bravely, but the toll of the battle was beginning to show. CHIDIMMA knew that they could not hold out forever. They needed to end the battle, to strike at the heart of the darkness and banish it once and for all. "Hold the line," she called out, rallying her warriors as she fought her way toward the center of the battlefield. She knew that the source of the darkness was near, and she was determined to find it. As she pushed forward, she saw a figure standing at the center of the enemy forces, a tall, menacing figure clad in dark armor, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. CHIDIMMA knew instinctively that this was the leader of the enemy, the source of the darkness that threatened their kingdom. With a fierce cry, she charged toward the figure, her sword blazing with light. The enemy leader turned to face her, a cruel smile spreading across its twisted face. "You think you can defeat me, little girl?" the figure hissed, its voice dripping with malice. You are nothing compared to the power of the darkness." Chidimma did not hesitate. She raised her sword and struck with all her might, the blade cutting through the darkness like a beacon of hope. The enemy leader howled in pain, its form flickering as the light of the sword pierced through it. But the battle was not over. The darkness surged around Chidimma, threatening to overwhelm her. She could feel the weight of it pressing down on her, the coldness seeping into her bones. But she did not give up. She could hear the voices of her ancestors, the spirits of the temple, urging her on. She could feel the love of her people, their hope and their trust in her. With a final, desperate effort, Chidimma plunged her sword into the heart of the enemy leader, the blade glowing with a brilliant, blinding light. The darkness around her shrieked and writhed, but it could not withstand the power of the ancients. The enemy leader let out one final, anguished cry, then dissolved into nothingness, the darkness fading away with it. The battlefield was suddenly still, the air clear and filled with the soft light of the rising sun. Chidimma fell to her knees, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The battle was over. The darkness had been defeated. Around her, the warriors began to cheer, their voices rising in a triumphant roar. They had won. They had saved their kingdom. Elder Namdi rushed to her side, his eyes filled with tears of joy. "You did it, Chidimma," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "You saved us all." Chidimma looked around at the faces of her people, her heart swelling with pride and relief. They had fought together, sacrificed together, and now, they would rebuild together. The final battle had been won, but Chidimma knew that their journey was far from over. There would be challenges ahead, trials to face, but she also knew that they would face them together, as one people, united by their strength, their courage, and their love for each other. As the sun rose higher in the sky, casting its warm, golden light over the land, Chidimma stood tall, her heart filled with hope for the future. The kingdom had been saved, and a new era of peace and prosperity was about to begin. And as long as she lived, Chidimma would protect that peace, guarding her people with the strength and wisdom she had gained on her journey. She was their leader, their protector, their beacon of hope. And she would never let them down. With the victory over the darkness, Chidimma and her people returned to their village, their spirits high and their hearts filled with hope. The once ravaged land was now bathed in the light of a new dawn, the air filled with the sounds of celebration and joy. As they made their way through the village, Chidimma was greeted with cheers and applause from the villagers. They had all played a part in the victory, and now, they would share in the rewards. Elder Namdi led the procession, his voice filled with pride as he addressed the gathered crowd. "Today, we celebrate not just a victory, but the beginning of a new era. An era of peace, prosperity, and unity. We have faced the darkness and emerged stronger, and now, we will rebuild our kingdom together." The villagers cheered, their voices ringing out in a joyful chorus. They had been through so much, but now, they could look forward to a brighter future. Chidimma stood at the center of the celebration, her heart filled with a sense of fulfillment and purpose. She had faced the trials of the temple, unlocked the power of the ancients, and led her people to victory. But she knew that her journey was far from over. There was still much to do, much to rebuild, and Chidimma was determined to see it through. She would walk alongside her people, guiding them with the wisdom and strength she had gained on her journey. As the celebrations continued, Chidimma felt a sense of peace settle over her. She knew that the challenges ahead would not be easy, but she also knew that she was ready to face them. For she was Chidimma, the leader of her people, the protector of her kingdom, and the guardian of the power of the ancients. And with that power, she would lead her people into a future filled with hope, prosperity, and peace. The journey had been long, the trials many, but in the end, Chidimma had emerged victorious. And now, as the sun set on the day of their victory, she looked to the horizon, her heart filled with hope for the future. For the kingdom had been saved, the darkness banished, and the people united. And with CHIDIMMA as their leader, the future was bright.